views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Social Justice Forums. I am Daren, Jaime, and of course, we thank you for joining us. For many of you who asked the question, what is the Social Justice Forums all about? Well, it's an opportunity to have a discussion about some of the inequities that many people face. We promote civic engagement, and then we also get multiple points of view to keep you informed on various matters. So stay with us. The Social Justice Forum starts right now. And welcome back to the show. Well, our nation's founding was based on the ideals of democracy as well as equality. However, there are several divisions that are happening in our nation, from intense anger towards certain groups, rising rates of mental health afflictions, and relatively easy access to guns. Across our nation, an outpouring of grief and outrage continues at the horrific violence and xenophobia perpetrated against Asian American communities, with a disproportionate number of attacks directed at women. A report from Stop AAPI Hate revealed nearly 3,800 incidents were reported over the course of roughly a year during this pandemic. While in New York City, there's also a surge in shootings and homicides at a level exceeding the grim numbers for 2020. Data reports on March 28th that 245 shootings, which is an increase across the 5 boroughs of nearly 50% over the past year. I'm pleased to be joined on the Social Justice Forums by Councilmember of New York City District 14, Fernando Cabrera, who is very much front and center on the front lines with this. And Councilman Cabrera, good to have you here on the Social Justice Forums.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always a joy.
Yeah, and I wish I could have you at better times, right? But the fact is, they are what they are. And when we look right now, we're looking across New York City, and New York City is increasing with the issue of Asian hate and violence against Asian Americans and Asians overall. Give me, first of all, as a council member, your sentiments on the Asian hate that we're seeing.
Well, actually, and thank you for that question. It's actually something that is very personal to me. What a lot of people may not know, my daughter-in-law, she's Asian. She's originally from Thailand. And my grandson, he's half Asian. And so I have to be honest with you, I'm worried. I'm very concerned every time she goes out into the streets because of the branding. We had a previous administration that, and I'm so afraid with branding, when people begin to brand and scapegoat and brand a certain group of people for the ills of society, it never comes out right. And what we need to do, we need to stand together in solidarity with our Asian brothers and sisters and say, we are not going to tolerate that, not in New York City.
Yeah, and when we see what's happening across New York City, it's a microcosm of a macrocosm, right? We're seeing this happen all across the nation. Talk to me about what you'd like to see in terms of resources and things going towards helping out with Asian hate.
Well, we need to up our educational effort. All racism is based on ignorance. Let me say that again. All racism is based on ignorance. And in that ignorance promulgates fear. And until we start bringing down those arguments that people have in their mind and shift the culture, a culture which says we value everyone, a culture that says we will honor everyone, regardless of their background, regardless of who they are. We're going to continue to see this, and this is why I believe at the very root we have to address this issue. And at the same time, we need to make sure that those who trespass the boundaries of safety that everyone is due, that we see true justice taking place for those who are being attacked. And you see this awful attack. Somebody can just be standing, Asian brother or sister, and just get hit in such a violent way, and we need to have justice for them. But we got to get back to the root of the problem, and that's going to take some funding. That's going to take some intentional strategies to be able to start reaching. And let's have a long-term plan here as well. Start reaching our young people, because this is something that people have learned wrongly, and we need to short circuit those efforts by those who would try to promulgate hate.
Yeah. Walk me through a little bit about what we're seeing across New York City. Obviously, as I spoke in the lead, there are these increasing numbers when it comes to gun violence. I want to first get your response to that, because at one point, it seemed as though we were doing a little bit better, but then the numbers continue to increase. Do you attribute this increase possibly to what we're experiencing in the pandemic?
Well, that's a loaded question. Let me break it down. You know, we right now, for some reason, we're acting like we don't know what to do. Up to last year, we were doing phenomenally well. We were the safest, largest city in the United States. Then the pandemic hit. And the pandemic is one of the big reasons why we're seeing the crime spike up, because of poverty. Poverty is often the catalyst for crime to spike up. Not always, but often. And so we got to get to the root of the matter of the problem. And that's why we need to expedite this economic recovery. In the meantime, let me just say this. Myself and another council member, we were responsible being the co-chair of the Gun Violence Task Force. Back in 2004, watch this, in the middle of a recession, to pass the only initiative during that time to start the Cure Violence program. We started with $6.7 million. This last year, we were up to $27 million. That was the main reason why we saw crime go down. We realized we can't deal this just with police force. We have to get young people help. And what that program did and continues to do is to take a credible messenger, former gang members, crew members who understand this street, who have a report with them, work with them. They're out every night between 10 o'clock at night to about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. They serve as interrupters to stop any form of retaliation that takes place whenever there's gun violence, provide jobs. And right now, we just infused another $4 million to provide jobs for young people who are involved around this circle. Then I call upon the first deputy mayor and the mayor during the hearings to double the amount of funding for gun violence. We know it worked before. We know that it is helping right now, but it's not sufficient due to the unusual and the anomaly of a problem we have right now because of the pandemic. I'm happy to tell you that for this summer, they're not only going to double, but now we're going to triple the amount of funding so we can help the young people find a better way.
Yeah. When we talk about young people, obviously we know that a lot of them really struggle with opportunities. Summer jobs, summer youth employment program, summer jobs program, those things are like cut. And so it puts people back out on the streets, creating that access to weapons and access to guns. We've heard a lot about the gun buyback program, how effective it is. From your perspective, is a gun buyback program effective in getting some of these guns off the street?
Absolutely, 100%. They have proven to be very, very effective. What we need is more funding. We need the DAs to put more funding towards it, and also the city of New York. The DAs can't do this by themselves. And may I say that they should use more often the houses of worship, asking people to bring their guns to the house of worship, have a system. Of course, it won't happen by chance, a particular day, and people be able to bring their guns to a house of worship. The police will be present, and somebody from the DA's office, and to be able to get these guns, and they'll get some kind of compensation. This is the quickest way to get, in a safe manner, guns off the street. Guns off the street means less shooting.
Right. But you hear some critics say that, okay, you'll get the guns off the street. There'll be some guns that come in through the gun buyback program, but they may not necessarily be the ones that are associated with crimes. And so is it an effective measure by way of that?
You know, it certainly is. Look, I'll give you an example. Right here where I live in Fordham Hill, we had a parent who had a gun for 10 years, which is surprising because Fordham Hill is very, very safe, you know. Uh, and the son ended up getting the gun, 8-year-old son, and ended up shooting himself. Uh, and thank God that he lived. But we have a situation where our child was in critical situation, almost died, uh, and thank God he made it through. But and also the other thing to think about when you have these guns at home and somebody breaks into your home, they're likely to escape. Young people that are living at home, they could get in an altercation in the street. They know there's a gun at home. They go, they get it, and start shooting people. But the reality is that we also have many people that at one time were in the life or and they say, you know what, I don't want this gun anymore. Instead of selling it to somebody else, their conscience is pricked, and they say, you know what, let me give it back to the buyback program. That way, it doesn't end up in the wrong hands.
Yeah. That buyback program, of course, is something that's happened here in the borough of the Bronx. We have seen, and we have covered that before. But where are we getting these guns from? Are you hearing anything as a council member? I know that you're in committees. I know that you're in sessions. We're hearing that, you know, that's Pennsylvania. We're hearing places like Ohio. They're coming up from the South. Can you give us a little bit more information as to what you're finding out about where these guns are actually emanating from?
You know, they're coming from states. As a matter of fact, we have the strongest uh, gun laws in the nation right here in New York. The problem is, as you stated, they're coming from other states, especially from Virginia, North Carolina, where laws are very lax. I lived in Virginia. Very easy to get a gun. I mean, it's too easy for somebody to be able to get a gun. And there are people who want to make a profit out of that, be able to buy guns over there. But it's not just in a gun store, but it's these guns. We get a lot of guns also. They come out of this flea market type of gun sales where you have 100 vendors coming in, where there is no background check. There is no check whatsoever because they're secondhand guns. And we need the federal government, Congress need to look at that very closely because unless we short circuit the amount of guns that are coming into, for example, New York City, are we going to continue to have this gun shooting? We just had 3 gun shootings this last weekend, 3 in the Bronx. Somebody got killed. We gotta say enough is enough. There has to be a surge of this righteous indignation that says we are not going to tolerate this, and it's going to take the whole community together to say, and government to step up and put a break before this becomes very chronic. I'm very concerned about this summer, very concerned about this summer. And if we don't do something, we could have a different type of epidemic, a crime epidemic.
You led into my next question, which really was coming up. I mean, the weather is getting warmer. We know traditionally when the weather gets warmer, that's the opportunity to see a lot more action out there on the streets. And unfortunately, a possibility to see increased gun violence. You talked about being very worried, very concerned. I want you to share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'm very concerned because number one, because we do have masks and people should be wearing masks right now, it's easier for someone like we saw in one of our parks where 2 young people were wearing masks. They're harder to identify. They started shooting into the park where there were young people there. Thank God nobody got hit. But it's a lot easier now for somebody to hide and conceal their face. This summer, because there's been this sense of pinup, there is a feeling, and I'll tell you what people tell me in the streets, of they feel like there's lawlessness. Some people feel that, and then you have the police force, right? They're saying we're not getting the level of support that is due to them, right? So when you start putting that combination and you still have the level of unemployment that we have right now, that is a cocktail, a potential cocktail for trying to surge. And this is why I'm so glad that we were able to have the commitment. You mentioned the youth, some youth employment. We have secured 70,000 jobs for young people. And then when you compile, you add on the Cure Violence program and triple the amount of the work that is going to take place, I'm hoping that that's going to be able to do the work that is needed. So this summer will not be a tragic summer. I just did a funeral. You know, I'm a pastor, and I just did a funeral last Saturday, the Saturday before, of a young lady who got shot right here in the middle. She young. She never got to see the best years of her life because somebody had a gun and they were in a small party. The gun went off and she's dead. There with the mom, broken, uh, devastated. No mother should have to bury their children because uh, somebody decided to use a handgun. It's not a toy. This is not Call of Duty. Uh, Lives are at stake here. And I'm calling upon every parent that is watching right now. They need us more than ever. They need us to get involved with our children, and especially the men. I need the men to step up. Young men need mentorship, and this is why at the Youth Detention Center, I started a mentorship program that's been going on for a couple of years. And watch this: every young person that got a mentor from day one, none of them have returned back. You know what we're lacking? More mentors. And so when we step up, we are able to provide that level of mentorship and instruction and expose young people to a better life. They will respond. Young people have dreams. When I'm around them, I see the dream. They don't want to be in that life. They tell me, say, Cabrera, this is like a business for us. I need something better. And that's why I'm glad that we're creating next steps for them through these programs.
So you do feel as though mentorship does make a difference?
100%. Every data of every research has shown is one of the most effective way of doing it, whether it's through the Cure Violence program, whether it's through detention. And we have not spoken about prevention. We need to do more prevention program. That's why most of my discretionary funding goes into doing prevention program. I was brought out with the idea, let's get our children so tired doing good, they'll be too tired to do bad. That's the way we were raised, right? I was like, my friends would say, oh, let's go do something. I'm too tired, man. And we know that sports help. We know that extracurricular activity helps. This should be an opportunity for every kid after school. We should have after school programs in every single school at different levels of interest to keep our young people doing the right thing and providing a good path in life.
Yeah. Before we go, I just want to have the opportunity to ask you to share a little bit more about your district, Fordham Road. You mentioned about jobs and businesses. Talk to me about what you're anticipating now that the city's seeing some reopening. I know a lot of businesses on that Fordham Road corridor had some great concerns. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, our businesses were hit at different level. We had the pandemic. We had the looting that took place in Fordham Road. That affected it. We were able, the next day after the looting, I was able to get the mayor to provide public-private funding for all of those businesses. That was able to help some of them. But look, the pandemic has hit not just Fordham, it hit the entire Bronx. We have lost close to 1/3 of our businesses. This is why I believe that BLDC, the Bronx Overall Economic Development, is crucial for the recovery, to infuse money to create new businesses and to help those who are here already. Small businesses services failed us during the pandemic. We only got 1% of all the loans that they were giving came to the Bronx, meaning 99% of those low interest loans end up going to other boroughs. And I've talked to the mayor about this. We have a commitment that there's going to be a shift taking place, so we're going to hold them accountable to that because we need economic recovery like never before. We need to remove all this red tape. By the way, I have two bills, and one of them is the business amnesty bill that basically will remove all of the fines of any fees that they need to pay the city of New York for penalties, and give them a 25% discount if they're able to pay in full. That will bring in $150 million into the city, and at the same time bring relief to the businesses. It is such an awesome plan that Crane's business editorial has endorsed it. And also when it comes to drivers, amnesty program as well for those who owe they owe through the DOT any fines, and that way they could get the same kind of recovery, and the city is able to capture also funding that we so desperately need right now. So this is a win-win situation for everyone.
We'll continue to follow that. And I want to thank you for coming here on the Social Justice Forums. We're going to be looking at the situation with guns as we get towards the summer. Hopefully, it won't be as bad as some people project. We're looking for a safe, healthy, and more progression coming out of this pandemic. Councilmember Cabrera, thank you so much for being with us here on the Social Justice Forums.
Thank you.
All right, taking a quick break. We do have more on this show. We want you to don't go anywhere. We're going to continue coming right back in a few.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scale of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting from BronxNet, this is Sherri Trans.
And welcome back. Since its founding in 1915, Women Creating Change has grown into an inclusive community, partnering with people and organizations focusing on underserved women to develop and strengthen the skills and resources needed to effectively identify the issues mattering to them most, as well as advocating for themselves in New York's diverse communities. WCC is focused on women's civic engagement, and their principles are empowering women from underserved communities with the knowledge to be change makers in their communities and in their everyday lives. Joining me now to share a little bit more, I am joined by Women Creating Change's President and CEO, Carole Wacey, and Board Chair, Deborah Martin Owens, and good to have you.
Thanks for having us, Daren.
Thank you so much for having us.
Great. First, someone may not be so familiar with the organization. Why don't you just give us a little bit of background into Women Creating Change?
Sure. We are an organization that was founded in 1950, as you mentioned, by some of the great women of our time. You're talking about Frances Perkins. We have Eleanor Roosevelt, just women who really led the way in New York City. And it's been in this last 106 years now, Carole, 107 years, we are just continuing that legacy. We are an organization that's focused on empowering women and being civically engaged in New York City. And so the history is long. It's a who's who, and we're just really excited to be able to create a legacy for the next 100 years.
Carole, share with me a little bit more about that word, civic engagement. We talk about it here on the show a lot, but what does civic engagement mean for you?
Yeah, it means a lot, and it's something we've spent a lot of time talking about as an organization. It really is helping to put people on their path to becoming civically engaged. We know women in communities across New York City are doing things in small and large ways to be involved and make a difference in their communities. So it could be everything from being part of a parent association at a school to attending a community board member or potentially being on the community board to running for office to volunteering in your community. There's a lot of ways that people get involved every day. And to just sort of tag on to what Deborah was saying, what Women Creating Change has really been focused on, how do we help women do that in ways that really support their needs, given that we know so much is on their plate every day.
Yeah. And Deborah, so what is the mission right now for Women Creating Change?
Oh my gosh. It's just so exciting because we went through this whole strategic plan the last 2 years, and it really is about empowering women in underserved communities. It doesn't mean that we're sort of telling women to how to lead, but we're empowering them in their leadership of what they're already doing.
And so when you talk about women being empowered, talk to us about that, because you spend a lot of time engaging women. Why do you feel like it's important in a time such as this, particularly at a time such as this, for women to be having their voices rise up?
That's a great question, Daren. For us, we've seen women leading in this for a very long time. For Black women, we have been involved from voting rights, from making sure that people got to certain churches, to making sure that they were registering people to vote, to making sure that people had something to eat. As you know, we couldn't go to certain restaurants or certain places to get food. So we've always been involved. And I think for me, WCC has always been that, even if it started out in an organization that didn't really envision the board chair being a Black woman. But for now, it is sort of leading that legacy of we're always been leading. Now, whether or not we've been seen, we are leading in this area. And I think Carole can talk a little bit about more as to why we are doing this now. But to your point, this is the perfect time. We have a vice president that is a Black woman. We have a major leadership positions in politics in New York State. I'll just talk about New York State right now. We think about Andrea Stewart-Cousins, just a host of folks. And for us, we've always been leading, and now Women Creating Change is just doing this for the next 100 years.
Carole, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. And I have to say, whether or not our founders envisioned Deborah being our chair or not, I think they would be really pleased. I think somebody like Eleanor Roosevelt and others would be really pleased with the leadership that she has shown to the organization. And as Deborah said, we went through a significant strategic planning process where we went out to the community. And that's what it's all about. It's not our organization deciding what should be happening in terms of civic engagement. The whole process was really about finding what's needed in the community and how can an organization like WCC that's been around for a long time really help to support that. And again, it's about giving women what they need in ways that they need it in their communities and assisting them in any way that they tell us that they need. So it might be multiple languages that we might need to provide our trainings in or the materials in. It might be providing food at one of our events when we have them in person. It might be providing daycare also when we're having events in person. It's really understanding the community we're trying to really work with and support and making sure that they have everything they need to get on their path to being civically engaged in their communities.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit with us about the Our City, Our Vote coalition?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on that. So that's a really important current initiative. We get involved in a whole array of initiatives related to civic engagement. Voting, of course, is one of them. And for all of the citizens in the country, when you turn 18, you vote. Although we know there's still some challenges around voting, we can certainly talk about that. But there's also, in New York City, there's almost 1 million people who are here legally, who work and pay taxes and still can't vote. These are some of our greatest assets. These are people who really care about the communities in which they work and live. And we're really working with a great host of partners, Idanis Rodriguez, city council member, as well as the New York Immigration Coalition and United Neighborhood Houses has been partnering with us to really make sure and really advocate for those 900,000 plus residents of New York City to vote. Historically, immigrants have been able to vote, and we lost that along the way. And we think that they're such an important part of the fabric of New York City and of our country that we really want to make sure that their voices are heard and that our elected, certainly at the city level, hear from them about what they want in their communities.
Carole, as we look right now, what do you see as the primary issue that really you want to be engaged in a time like this?
Yeah, well, and I think when we think about issues, there's a lot of different issues that matter to different people. So as you were saying earlier, when we're still in the midst of a pandemic, so health and jobs and the economy are very important to people. So we want to make sure they have information that they need to be able to make good decisions for themselves, their families, and their people that they care about in their lives. And again, we're really trying to work with all the women that we're supporting to let them define the issues that are important to them and make sure that WCC can also just bring resources, skills, and support them on that path.
Yeah. Deborah, talk to me for a few minutes about this as we talk about where we are today. Obviously, we said we're seeing women at the forefront. We're seeing women making change and impacting change. And you look at Washington, D.C., you mentioned Kamala Harris, and you look in Congress, you look across the state, you see assembly leaders, political leaders. But if you're not even in any of those circles, women overall are having a larger footprint. Talk to us about what you're seeing and what you want your organization, how would you like the organization to fill that gap?
Thank you so much, Daren. That's a great question. We see our organization as a place where inclusivity lives. We want to make sure that all women are supported in their aspirations of being civically engaged. Sometimes we just don't know where to start. But if we look back, women are always advocating for their families, for their community. They really are sort of leading in that issue. Now, whether or not they know what's going on in Washington, I think now we all do because it has been a tumultuous, time recently. But I see this as an opportunity for WCC to lead and to support those women. We are 100-plus-year-old organization, so our resources, our access to resources are tremendously more broad than maybe a particular group in a community like where I came from, which was in Queens. So for us, we see that as saying, okay, we're going to lead, we're going to help women be empowered. They are closest to the problem, so they're closest to the solution. And this gives us the ability to do what we've always been doing.
Right. And as you talk about doing what you've always been doing, I think all of us have been challenged by COVID-19 and this pandemic. How has it affected you doing what you've normally been doing?
Yeah, it's definitely been a tough time for us, but I will tell you that under Carole's leadership, we have not skipped a beat. We've been putting out tremendous resources to all communities. We've actually hosted quite a few events called Table Talks, where we bring in civic leaders to talk about the issues that are going on in our organization or in their community. So we haven't missed a beat under her leadership, but I will say it's kind of hard. If you are doing this kind of work, you are in the community, and that's been difficult for us, but it doesn't mean that it hasn't been successful. I feel that we've been able to lead this even in the pandemic.
Carole, so as we look towards the future, what do you have coming up next?
Great question. There's a lot on the agenda, and as Deborah said, we had to pivot and really find ways to support people creatively during the pandemic. So a couple things on the agenda that I think might be of interest to your viewers. One is we're rolling out our first part of our initiative called Civic Matters. And Civic Matters is our signature program where we're really trying to deliver programming to support women. It was designed by women with women to support women in communities across New York City. The first part of that is a workshop series. We have one coming up about sort of a know your rights and civic engagement 101. And if you're interested in those, you can certainly reach out to us on our website. And then we're going to be also looking ahead to developing an online resource hub where people can come learn about information, but also take action on those resources down the road. We're also going to be developing a fellowship series as well as a civic leadership institute. Great partners with all of them from great institutions across New York City. But coming up almost immediately, we have two great events. One is coming up about voting. We have an important city vote coming up in June, and we'll be having a voting workshop on the 14th in partnership with the Civic Engagement Commission as well as Democracy NYC. And the other exciting thing, Daren, that I wanted to share with you is we're going to be releasing a white paper. We thought it was really important to explain what we're doing, why we're doing it, understand some of the barriers to civic engagement, what it really is, why it makes a difference in communities across New York City. And we're also going to be outlining some very specific recommendations for all sectors, nonprofit, foundations, corporate, and government, to really make a difference in civic engagement across New York City. And we're really excited about that. And that will be happening in the next month.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Deborah, before we go, you're gonna get the final word. What would you like us to know?
A WCC is for everyone. We need everyone at the table supporting this organization as we support the community. That's including our men in our lives. Be engaged, support. This is a time for us to be involved now more than ever. If you have an opportunity, please reach out. We're on social media. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Follow us, engage with us, and just at the end of the day, understand that we all need this support to support the community, because it doesn't stop because we have, certain folks in office. We have to continue to hold our electeds accountable. So I would say that. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you both for being here on the show. Certainly been a pleasure to have you, and certainly a pleasure to learn more about your organization. Deborah, Carole, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daren.
All righty. Well, we're going to take a quick break here on the Social Justice Forums. I want you to stay with us. We have more show coming up right after this.
We built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx. on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
And welcome back to the show. The digital divide remains a constant for many New Yorkers, a constant obstacle, that is. And it's only seems to be intensified during the pandemic when many people are forced to work from home, and then also children who have to attend school remotely. As COVID-19 makes the lives of late high school and early college students uncertain, young women of color are working towards careers in tech are facing a deeper and a more uphill battle as they try not to be left further behind an evolving new normal. Now, despite women of color making up only about 20% of the population, somehow they only account for about 4% of the workforce in technology. Our next guest, one who has literally broken the glass ceiling. She's the editor-in-chief of Laptop Magazine, which serves as the essential guide for tech-savvy consumers who depend upon expert product evaluations and user guides for cutting-edge tablets, laptops, smartphones, apps, accessories, and more. We're pleased to be joined by the editor-in-chief of Laptop Magazine, Sherri L. Smith, and good to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here, as always.
And as we look right now, I talked in the intro a little bit about that digital divide. And we know that particularly in communities of color, there is this huge digital divide. So from your professional standpoint, what can you tell us about this digital divide along racial lines?
I mean, it's such a big problem. Currently, there are about a third of homes in New York City that do not have access to broadband, let alone high-speed broadband. And it's definitely along racial and socioeconomic lines. And it's a twofold problem. It's an infrastructure problem and it's a provider problem. So with the infrastructure, richer neighborhoods, those neighborhoods that like the NIMBY, homeless shelters and things of that nature, or like when it's like, oh well, maybe we need to adjust a test how we're testing students. Those neighborhoods tend to get the creme de la creme of all the service. So you're getting the high speed, you're getting you might get choice of service. And meanwhile, communities of color, communities that are on the lower socioeconomic totem pole are not getting those services, if any. So for instance, I'm working from home. I pay Verizon a hefty sum to make sure that all the tech in my house is connected and it's connected in a fast rate. I am paying a hefty sum, a sum that I am blessed to be able to afford. Not everybody can afford that fee. So on top of that, like I'm also, depending on where I live in Brooklyn right now. I am lucky that the area that I live in Brooklyn, there are two ISP providers. So you've got Optimum and you've got Verizon. So there's a little bit of a competition. So when I left Optimum, like every 2 weeks, Optimum sends me a placard, baby, come back. I'm not coming back because the service it just wasn't for me. I'm not going to say it was trash. It just was not for me. But I have that option of choice. A lot of neighborhoods in the city across America, we are in a monopoly. So wherever you live, you are stuck with whatever service provider that you have, and they are at their whim to dictate the price. So if they want to jack it up, they're going to jack it up. And a lot of times, like if you can afford it, you're just going to harumph and grumble, but you're still going to pay it. But for people that can't afford it, that have to decide, well, am I going to get my necessities or am I going to get this internet access? The answer is clear. I'm going to get those necessities, and it just shuts them out of having the same opportunities that during this pandemic have been so necessary. You need internet access. I've conducted interviews with people for jobs, and they're so embarrassed because they're on laggy internet, and I'm trying to do my best to calm it, because I understand, like, calm down. It's okay. It's not your fault. Like, if worst comes to worst, we can reschedule. We can do this by phone. It doesn't have to. But these are problems that I'm seeing trying to interview people. So I can only imagine what it's like being a student trying to sit in on a Zoom call, trying to do your homework or just get basic access to look up something to finish your work.
Right. I mean, but when you think about it, you know, when the internet first started, people found it to be a luxury, right? It was a luxury. But now, pre-COVID, you can honestly say the internet is no longer a luxury. It's a necessity. And when you look around in communities of color, impoverished neighborhoods, it seems as though the digital divide just keeps getting wider and wider and wider.
It absolutely does. And we need to start looking at internet as a utility, as a necessity, the same way that in the wintertime or at any time that there's a hardship and the water company can't shut off your water, they can't shut off your electricity, then there needs to be that type of approach to internet. Thankfully, New York is working on some measures to do that, particularly when it comes to affordable housing. So there are bills and legislation on the floor that's basically saying that if you are building affordable housing, that you need to make sure that it is wired, wired to a certain extent to provide folks living there with internet access. And the city is trying to work out a plan to work with private companies, as well as maybe doing something statewide to make sure that people have access to internet access. It's not like there are several ideas being being rolled around. I don't think that there's been anything concrete yet, but at least in New York City, that is the plan, to make sure, because it's obvious that as we have Google here, we have Amazon, we have all these tech companies, it's pertinent to make sure that every New Yorker has the tools that they need, whether you're working in retail or whether you're an engineer, to get online and do the things that you need to do.
When you talk about internet right now, we talk about computers, we talk about laptops. I'm laughing because I've got some kids that I stay in contact with, and they tell me, they say, hey, listen, you know, some of us have laptops during this thing called virtual. Some of us are struggling. And it seems as though, from what I gather, and I know from your vantage point, that when it comes to certain households, that even having the necessary supplies that are supposed to be provided by schools aren't even making it into the households.
Absolutely. I just read a story on CBS about a little girl who noticed that a lot of her classmates were not in class, virtual class, because they didn't have laptops. She took $200 of her own money and bought somebody a laptop. Like, the movement caught on, and she managed to raise a GoFundMe, and she's been able to donate at least 20 laptops. And yes, that's a great feel-good story, but honestly, that is, if you look past the larger picture of it, why is a child having to do a GoFundMe to help other children? And we live in New York City, one of the greatest cities in the world, in my opinion, definitely one of the richest, but we can't get our kids the things that we need. Like any society, you're only as strong as your weakest link. So if you're not willing to help your weakest link, what does that say about you as a society?
Right. I mean, it does say a lot. I think we have a lot of challenges, and we understand that we have all this money and we can find money to do whatever. It's very clear that when you look around, if it's war, If it's, doing something else, we can allocate money where money needs to be allocated. This pandemic has definitely shown us that. But when it comes to the essentials and the priorities, it sometimes feels as though we're coming very far short from where we really need to be. Hopefully, as we come out of this pandemic, there won't be too many casualties by way of education and not having the access to internet, as well as to the laptops, the Chromebooks, whatever it is. But let me get your professional advice for somebody that doesn't have access to maybe a laptop. What would be the best way to get started to have some technology at home? Because for some people, this is an initial transition.
Right now, if you can't get your hands on a laptop, a cheap tablet, like a cheap tablet is better than nothing. You can get a little Bluetooth keyboard to go with it, and you can survive with that. You could do it with the phone as well, but a phone has a smaller screen. Unless you're willing to mirror the phone to your TV, if your TV even has that capability, that's an option as well. Your local libraries are always as we are starting to reopen, they are always a valuable resource, and there are plenty of nonprofits that will help out or have programs to get to help students in particular get the things that they need when the school system just drops the ball.
So let's talk about you for a moment. You're the editor-in-chief of Laptop Magazine, and we don't see many people, particularly communities of color, in the tech field. What was the impetus for you to say, hey, I want to get involved. I want to do this. I want this to be my career.
I didn't even know this job existed when I was a little girl. Like, my mother is very good to this day, because she does it to my niece and my nephew. She will look at you and she will see what you're good at, and she will develop that talent. My mother saw that I was good at a couple of things: reading, writing, and video games. And she nurtured those things. Like, as long as my grades were good, I could have any console I wanted. She made sure that I was never at a lack for a notebook, a pen, books to read, and she just she does not believe in idle children. So Saturdays she found a computer programming program that was run by a black couple, a doctor, a pair of educators. Me and my brother, we were there every Saturday. Like, not only were we learning about computer science, it was also half of it was computer science, half of it was learning about your Black heritage, learning about Africa, learning about all these things. So it was a great program. Like, she made throughout the course of my education, she always made sure that there were supplements to pick up the slack where maybe it wasn't getting taught in class or it wasn't being taught here. Like, she made sure that I learned, I got out of my little small 1 square mile of town every now and then and saw the world beyond the 1 square mile. That was so important, to know that the world is bigger than what you see right now, especially when you're a kid. All you know is your blocks and where you're allowed to go and what have you. She made sure, when they opened up a charter school for technology, she made sure my butt was there. She made there were people along the way that saw that I had this talent, and I actually went to Rutgers thinking I was going to be a pre-med major, but math and we do not mesh. But I still had that love of writing, so I decided to come out as an English major, but I knew I wanted to write. I knew I did not want to teach. I knew I wanted to be a journalist, and I actually started out at blackplanet.com.
Really?
Yeah, OG Black Planet. I started out as an entertainment writer.
Wow.
I interviewed the likes of Mary J. Blige and John Legend and Flowetry and Beanie Man, and then layoffs happened. And thankfully, when I was at that job, I had 2 strong Black women mentors who were so kind. Like, they made sure they took me out to get a wardrobe for my job interviews. They got my resume professionally done. They introduced me to my next job through Lindy Johnson, one of the original Black technokraties, and I ended up at Inc.com and Fast Company, not as a writer, but as a community moderation manager, because they were trying to build out social networks. So I was doing that, but I hustled my way into writing because that's what I wanted to do. And then I see Lynn with these funky Beats headphones, and she's got these bad sneakers on, and she is just the epitome of cool. And I'm like, I want to do that. And so I started doing more and more writing, but again, layoffs. So this time I went freelance, but I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a tech writer. So I started doing tech writing and a little bit of entertainment writing for the likes of BET.com, Black Web 2.0. And I did that for 3 years. And I kept applying to this job, my dream job, at this little publication called Laptop Mag. And the first 2 times I could not get a call back, did not get a call back. But every time that job popped up, I applied. And the 3rd time was a charm, and I got that call back. And by then I had the experience that I could built in, where they didn't really have to train me. Like, yes, like they would mold my writing to how they needed it to be, but I already knew tech. So I made it easy for them to bring me on. And I've been with Laptop ever since. So now this is 13 years. I started at the bottom as a staff writer. Now I'm the editor-in-chief.
Amazing story. Amazing story. Now, if people want to find out how to get connected to Laptop, how they go about doing that?
Of course, go to laptopmag.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at laptopmag. We are starting an Instagram. I actually am doing a clubhouse called Hotline Tech with one of the editors in chiefs of my sister sites, where one day we talk about tech news. The other day, because we're doing Tuesdays and Thursdays, the other day we talk about how to get into the industry and how, like, if you're a young writer, how to pitch, how to do, if you're a PR agent, how to get in contact with us, or how to do a really compelling cover letter. Those things that, you typically have to just stumble through and hope and wish and pray. I want to make sure that people have this information. Or if you're feeling froggy, if you please let me pitch me. Like, I'm on Twitter, Miss Smith 11, MISS Smith 11. I am always looking for dynamic writers that are passionate about tech. I'm always looking for the next new voice in tech, and I love working with inexperienced writers.
Oh, well, we want to thank you for being with us here on Social Justice. And of course, we'll get people connected to you. And hopefully we'll have an opportunity to stay connected, find out more about closing this digital divide, and definitely increasing the amount of people involved in the tech world. It's a huge field, and we need more like you. Thank you so much for being with us, Sherri L. Smith.
Not a problem. Thank you for having.
All righty. Well, we want to thank Sherri. We want to thank all of you for watching the Social Justice Forums. I want to tell you, check us out next week. We're going to elevate the conversation. We're going to continue to provide you with critical information and talking about the things that are making a difference right here in our very own communities. I'm Daren Jaime saying take care. God bless. We'll see you next week on the Social Justice Forums.